Yo guys, Visionist Gen here, bringing you more Marvel Rivals Best Competitive Team, Part 7, where I'll be breaking down the best possible lineup to be using, containing the Asguardians of the Galaxy heroes, which happens to be one of the best and most viable lineups to be using right now in the game, as of the latest update and leading up to Season 2, which can be used in competitive at pretty much most of the ranks, and with the aim of this episode to explore using unique team-ups and Marvel lore between Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. So, on that note, let's get right into it. Now, as usual with this series, I'll explain how to use each of the 6 heroes in this video based on their roles, whilst also identifying what adjustments you'll want to consider, explaining when you would make them and why. And as for the roster itself, I won't be going over a guide as such on all of their individual abilities, as I've made separate guides for most of these heroes separately on my channel anyways, and for the most part, I am assuming that anyone watching this video and learning about the best comp lineups to be using right now is already fully aware of most of the heroes or all of their abilities and what they do. Now, in this video and going forward, I'm going to continue implementing new lineups, different and more unique lineups for the future episodes, as well as the most competitive lineups. With, of course, Season 2 round the corner, I will be making a new video with the new heroes and the new meta based on buffs and also nerfs that will be taking place in the latest update as of April 11th. Now, of course, not all of these lineups will work in competitive. Depending on your rank as well as your skill level, you should probably try some of these team comps or individual heroes themselves in a more casual environment that's not as consequential. But this episode in place is for you to be aware of each possible lineup that is both enjoyable and also viable in this game, but also for me to explain why and when you'd also consider using these lineups. Now, this team, however, for episode 7 is viable in competitive 100%, as it contains current meta team-ups and heroes, as well as a well-balanced team comp from brawling, shielding tanks to mobility, high DPS and range from both the duelists and supports. So, as for episode 7 and this current lineup, as usual, we'll be starting with the tanks, and for this setup, we will be using a 2-tank setup, my personal favourite, which will consist of both Thor and Groot, with the theme of the squad, as I mentioned, revolving around the Asguardians of the Galaxy. So, for the third hero, we'll be using the Star-Lord as the DPS for this squad, and we'll actually be using a triple support setup as well as the 2 tanks, which will consist of Rocket, Mantis, and Adam Warlock as the 4th, 5th, and 6th heroes. And as for their roles, so starting with Thor, he'll be your brawling and diving style tank, responsible for separation of other tanks such as Strange and Magneto, utilising Groot's walls to isolate other tanks and break down the squad from that way in, and then also responsible for flight and aerial mitigation, so challenging the likes of Storm from being effective, and also responsible for dealing area of effect damage using his ultimate and the lightning. As for Groot, of course, using his walls for damage mitigation as well as separation with Thor in support of that, containing other enemies, and then also pace slower, being someone that just breaks down the way the game is played and creates pace at their own movement. So if you have a good Groot on your team, you can really push the objective really far up the map on the convergence and payload game modes. And as well as this, you can prevent ranged duelists from getting really easy picks on your supports, such as Hela or Hawkeye, by using Groot. And as well as the walls themselves do deal a crazy amount of damage, so in placing them in key situations can really help deal a whack load of damage when you need to. As for Star-Lord, the only duelist in the squad, he'll be responsible for mobility and evasion, staying alive when needed, but also dealing burst DPS when necessary, and also being the final hit specialist, also known as the Executioner, what I like to refer to them as, who's someone who'll be able to get those squishier targets that try and escape when needed, and also just track down, trace, and then back up to the team, also known as peeling. As for Rocket, he is a great second or third healer. I'm not too fussed about what other people think of him. He definitely does work in a 3 support setup, but also a discreet tank destroyer. A lot of people don't realize this, but he is someone who shreds and melts high health targets with large hitboxes, and this can be utilized as a further damage output, considering you're only going to use one duelist. Also, his respawn beacon, his BRB device, is really useful for the revival and adding more of a clutch factor to this squad, and as well, of course, his damage buff from his ultimate being super effective, especially when you pair it with the likes of the Star-Lord ultimate. That 2 combo can be really effective at melting other players. Now, as for the 5th player, we'll be using Mantis, who will be the main healer in this setup. Now, typically, I wouldn't suggest using Mantis as a main healer in a 2 support setup, but definitely in this setup, she would definitely work, responsible for healing over time and also being the counter dive of the squad, utilizing the sleep ability for the likes of Spider-Man, Venom, you name it, and also being a good damage buff alongside Rocket and providing great movement speed for the squad using the ultimate, as well as providing maximum health, also using the ultimate ultimate, which is really effective, and of course the rebirth, a team up ability that both her and Star-Lord gain from having Warlock as the 6th hero in this squad, being the anchor as a 2nd and also 3rd healer in the squad, responsible for sniping and dealing range damage to those more backline and aerial heroes. But also the clutch factor that Adam Warlock adds, using the ultimate and of course the rebirth team up. That is the general theme of this video, as well as utilizing the revival BRB device from Rocket, kind of being the key for this squad, as you're not going to have those defensive ults with the likes of Luna, Invisible Woman, and also Cloak and Dagger. So you really need to utilize the fact that this team can keep coming back into the action, and when played right, you will constantly have an upright team, someone that's just not man down at times. And if you played right with the right ultimate from Adam Warlock, you will just constantly have pressure on the game mode and constantly be in the action. Now, as I mentioned with every other episode, with a structured team, you need to understand your team lineup and the strengths and weaknesses, understanding your own heroes counters and also the team up counters, and also the current team up meta. So as I've mentioned in this series, episode 7 is basically the current meta right now, utilizing the actual team up from Adam Warlock, Star-Lord, and Mantis. And also just generally communication with your squad. You need to understand when people don't go certain players or if they want to change it up throughout the game. Reading between the lines is like what I've referred to it as. High ranks in competitive, you tend to just get this at the start of a game. You'll just know based on a certain map or based on who's been banned, you'll know that this will work and that won't work and so on. And it's just crucial for you to finding success in competitive in general. So I just wanted to make that clear. And also with the bans, this is the sort of next step. You need to understand who you want to ban in this setup and why. Understanding your counters for your own individual team, as well as your strengths and weaknesses as a squad, but as I mentioned, also as an individual. But anyways, as for the heroes you'll want to ban and why, the obvious ones are Wolverine, Winter Soldier, and Spider-Man. Reason being, Wolverine can really cause a lot of issues for the likes of Groot, peeling him away from the squad and then taking him out and isolating him. Winter Soldier, same sort of reason, with his crowd control and his grapple ability, can really just disrupt the way this game is played and also the effectiveness of Groot in general, and as well as your support. And then also Spider-Man being a dive threat and also just being one of the most broken characters in the game currently. Other heroes I'd consider is probably Hela, due to the lack of range pressure from your squad. She can really slow down your Star-Lord and your Warlock, so maybe consider them, as there's a lot of pressure on your Groot to place good walls otherwise. And then also the other one I would maybe suggest is also Venom, due to Mantis probably having a lot of pressure on her as the only counter dive really in this setup, as just generally dive heroes are going to be a bit of a problem for the squad. But if the 3 supports play well together and also utilize Star-Lord as a backup, then you should be able to really mitigate the effectiveness of these dive heroes. But it's just something to be aware of, and also making your Thor player aware that he needs to be peeling and supporting you guys more often if you are getting dove on. Also by the likes of maybe Black Panther and Magic, they can also be a problem for the squad. But anyways, moving on to the adjustments, when you'd make them and why. Starting with Thor, like I mentioned, if the setup isn't working, it's typically probably due to the dive heavy comp playing against your supports. Therefore, you may need to switch Thor to the likes of Penny as one of the best counter dive heroes in the game in my opinion, or your team probably needs to start diving yourselves due to the other team having a more range setup, and with a lack of go-to pressure for the likes of Thor, maybe change Groot to Captain America for a dual dive pressure to mitigate the damage output, and then that way you can allow your damage and your supports to stay alive and deal more themselves. As well as this, for Groot, if the other team has a Winter Soldier or a Wolverine, as I mentioned, and this is affecting Groot, then probably change him to either the Thing for point pressure and also his immune effect to the crowd control, and also pairing quite well with Penny. Or if you want to, you can change him to Venom himself for a more dive comp, also having the symbiote team up ability with Penny Parker, or as I mentioned, change him to Captain America if you're going to keep Thor as your number 1. But in my opinion, you definitely need to keep a 2-tank setup. Now, as for Star-Lord, like I mentioned, if you end up changing the squad, it probably means you're going to be losing a healer, as this will be the most likely reason due to the dive pressure, and Adam Warlock is quite vulnerable. So if you do need more dives or better counter dives, you will then want to consider changing Star-Lord to the likes of Spider-Man for the Venom and Penny team ability, as this combo works really well, or consider changing Star-Lord to Storm for the Thor and Captain America team up, or a low-key one I would consider is changing to Mr. Fantastic for his brawling and hybrid capabilities with the Thing, and almost having a 3-tank setup, which is quite powerful, especially on the defensive side on game modes. There's many options as you can see, but I would change this option based on who your tanks are in my opinion. Now as for Rocket, as I've mentioned, if you're going to change the setup, don't keep 3 supports and therefore add another duelist. Now you could add Squirrel Girl for her crowd control and counter dive capabilities, but also the Spider-Man team up if you have him, and also you can add more ranged and splash damage to disrupt the enemy backlines and their setup in general, or just change to Namor as the ultimate counter dive hero if that is your problem. However, if you want more range damage, and if you already have a Thor and a Captain America brawling and Storm in the skies sniping, then maybe consider changing to Hela for her burst DPS and more mid-range damage output, map dependent of course, but she would definitely work in this setup. Now as for Mantis, I would change to a more primary focus healer such as Invisible Woman, who also provides the Thing with the Fantastic Four team up, or Luna Snow for the Namor team up. Both are absolutely meta in this game, so either would work. And then as for Adam Warlock, I would consider changing him to Loki for more ranged and split healing with his clones and his mirror ultimate, and also the Hela team up ability with Thor as well, or just maybe change to Cloak and Dagger for the lock on ability as a counter dive hero, the vulnerability effects that's really effective at melting tanks, better healing, and also point pressure with the ultimate, especially if the other team doesn't have a Magneto on their squad. Now, two things just to remember and understand is, remember you are changing the team around based on who the other team has, not just to your favorite hero for the sake of it if it's not going well. You really need to think about the structure and the strengths and weaknesses. Also, if you do notice that the other team has two defensive healing ults, such as maybe Luna Snow, Invisible Woman, etc., it becomes very noticeable that this is just preventing your team from progressing up the map, then just don't wait around to change. Change Rocket to a better healer straight away, to a more defensive healer sooner, or maybe Mantis. I would definitely consider using and keeping Warlock if you have a Star-Lord in the team up, but if you change Star-Lord, then just get rid of Adam Warlock straight away. Now, as for the team up abilities for all of the named heroes in this list, here's a quick summary of all of the potential link-ups to consider when you're forming your squad. Now, the first one you'll get is the Groot and Rocket. The second one is the Warlock, Mantis, and Star-Lord. The third one is Penny, Venom, and Spider-Man. The fourth one is Thor, Captain America, and Storm. The fifth one is The Thing and Mr. Fantastic with Invisible Woman. The sixth one is Squirrel Girl and Spider-Man. The seventh is Namor and Luna. And the eighth one is Hela, Loki, and Thor. So, as you can see, there's quite a lot on the table there. And as a summary, this lineup and team structure initially has a great damage buffing capabilities, as well as good healing all around, and containment advantages versus other squads, as well as this using sleeps and other sort of crowd control abilities in this squad. But it is key to understand who you change to, when you do it, and why, which, as I've mentioned in this video time and time again, is the key for this. Now, with the adjustments mentioned, you should really be able to flexibly alter each of the heroes in the squad where required, depending on whether your team is finding success off the break or whether or not the other team is making adjustments to counter your lineup throughout the game. So just consider this. And if you notice the other team has a Spider-Man and Venom dive comp straight away, especially on maps like Central Park, don't wait the entire game to change your setup. Just make the changes, as this squad will struggle versus these two. So change to Penny, Squirrel Girl for the crowd control, and Cloak and Dagger for the lock on, and you just get the idea. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That's episode 7. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you have any alterations that you'd make to this lineup and why. If you have any cool clips that you'd like to share or tips for these heroes, let me know as well in the comments. I'm Visionist Gen, and I'll see you in the next one.